Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly video games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Back with another episode. This is episode number 443 for Sunday, the 2nd of August, 2026. Here with me, as always, I have my stalwart partners in crime. A full round table this evening, starting with Mr. Towmaster 99. How you doing, Tow?
First today. I'm good. I'm glad to be back. It's been a while. Seems like it's been a while.
Very cool, very cool. And in co-pilot seat number 2, Mr. DBQ Hams. How you doing, DBQ?
Doing well. Yes, Tao, I think it has been a while since we've had all three of us here at the same time, so which is good.
You know, a new location there?
Yes. Yep. Moving things around, set up a dual screen system here, so
nice. If you would have made it on time for the pre-show, Tao, you would have caught the whole rundown.
That's okay. But yes, I'm in a totally different setup. And but no, good to be back. So thanks for everybody listening. Thanks for the acknowledgement and willingness to be flexible last week. So
I like to be fashionably late, as they say.
I'm just joking. It's usually me who's running behind. So Thrifty and Hero Down Under. Thanks so much for coming through. No worries, Hero. We'll get through. It's always fun to discuss things in the Discord, even when there's a little friction. It's all good. I appreciate you asking the question. It helped me to it always helps me like to talk out stuff with people. Like even when it may seem like there's a thing that I know. Like I talk about this at work often. It's like no, like when people ask me questions and force me to go over it again and poke holes in it, right? It helps reinforce, right, the learning for all of us, right? That's the thing that is the friction more so than anything. It's not the one-upsmanship, right? It's the fact that the one-upsmanship is a fire blanket, right, and a wet paper towel over people having an intellectual conversation, all trying to learn a thing. So too many people have been raised in this era of social media and, like to, pull zingers and one-liners and try and stop a conversation instead of just exchanging an idea, right? Like that's how conversation and debate started, right? It's an exchange of ideas so that we all learn. So I'm just a little tired, right, and over like the internet and social media and Discord channels where, in an effort to be right, because that's what makes somebody feel validated, that we have to do that kind of stuff, right? Stuff that, like, if I ever heard somebody say that at work, right, I would immediately put the kibosh on it, right, and kick them out of a conference room, because you don't make your teammates feel like, like they shouldn't be offering their opinion. So, which is what it's about. It's not about I say something and so everybody should assume that I'm right. I'm sorry. I apologize for the lecture, guys, but like I constantly say on this channel, on Brap Show, on my own show, I say constantly, don't take what I say and go repeat it and accept it as gospel. Take what I say, do your own research, search out other opinions, and then arrive at your own conclusion, right? It's simply a matter of gathering different data points. So
I think what Hero said in the chat here, if people should ask questions to learn, not to set a trap, is spot on. And I think that's the benefit of whether it's the conversations and discourse that you have in a variety of Discord channels, or if we have here on Enough to Keep Going, the idea that we can, every once in a while stand in a soapbox, but it's the intent is to not back somebody into a corner and hammer them down with an opinion, but to express ideas, to share some information and some analysis to hopefully allow people to come to some conclusions, or to go out, as you said, Game Logic, right? Go out and dig around on themselves so that they can, on their own, to find out that, draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Sorry for the diatribe and the segue, but I was a little fired up today. So, and Ramon Terrell, thanks so much.
For the rest of us who weren't there for the fired up part, what was the conversation?
Okay, and this is worthwhile because it's pertinent. To say, thanks so much, Ramon Terrell. star of Arrow and many other television shows. Thanks so much. And author of I cannot recall the name of your series right off the top of my head, which is embarrassing. Certainly, if I had looked at it like 5 minutes ago, I would absolutely remember. But thanks so much for coming through the chat. By the way, I appreciate you. So the conversation today was around digital rights, and really, well, it was a postulate that that Hero had found like a video on, and actually I'll bring up an article that I wrote on rounding off infinity because it is also kind of in the ballpark of this topic, and I don't know why don't have a bookmark, but the theoretical was, hey, what happens if a digital content provider such as Steam or PlayStation or Xbox in this era of the impending all digital future, what happens if they go bankrupt, right, or go out of business? And not to poo-poo on the notion, but when I go even to Steam, like this question has been asked about Steam, and people have thrown this out. I'm not saying this was the video that you posted, Hero, but many people have thrown that out as a zinger, right, as a bazinga, for over a decade. Oh, all you digital guys, what happens if like Steam goes out of business, right? You'll lose all your content. And the thing that that I was trying to point out, and so Hero says it was a Reddit thread. I was just asking on Google and found that thread since I started going more digital. Gotcha. Hero. So what I had posted was like, look, we have had these instances where when a corporation who is a purveyor of digital goods goes bankrupt, goes out of business, whatever, that the court will typically like work with the lawyers and the vendor to either take it's kind of like the digital equivalent of a home foreclosure, right? The court, if you so they encourage you to do it yourself, right? They encourage you to find a buyer. They encourage you to find someone who is willing to purchase these assets and take over the service end of the continued, I'll just call it warranty for the sake of discussion for tonight, right? Of providing service for those people. And if you can't, then the court works with court appointed intermediaries who have the capability, and typically like large scale companies will run this as like a very minor like value stream, like off in a corner of of their IP department and litigation or whatever, and run it like a little cottage business. Sometimes it'll be like a shell company or whatever, like a front, but it's like a small company that says, hey, we're part of the legal system that in an instance where a company goes out of business who is a purveyor of digital goods, like I'm sure, for instance, like Amazon runs this as a little cottage business, right? We will take custody of the digital assets, like we will go get the servers, or we will migrate their data right into an S3 bucket, and we'll hold on to it right to the court for some like nominal fee. Like they're not making tons of money off of it. And so and then eventually, right, by chance, some other company will come along and purchase those assets, and then continue to provide the service. So this can sometimes happen during the moment in which the liquidation is happening. Sometimes it happens after the fact. So we had this happen with Telltale Games. We had this happen with Ultraviolet movies. We had this happen with I'm not familiar with it. I think they're an Indian company, but I think they were called Darius, and a company called like One Play, I think, took over their assets. But we've had numbers of occasions where a company that is a vendor of digital goods that they've sold to you is going out of business, or the service goes down, and the ownership for those digital goods is transferred via some agreement or some settlement to another entity. And then that entity puts out an announcement and they say, hey, if you want to continue to download your stuff, like go to this is the new URL. Like, Ultraviolet is going away on 15 August or whatever, and it is not as if this has not happened before, right? It's happened multiple times before. And so in my perception, and again here, I'm not saying that the people were saying this, I actually didn't read the Reddit thread or look at the video, but like in the event that something like Steam or PlayStation or Xbox were to somehow miraculously go away overnight, right? These $30 billion, $20 billion, and $17 billion businesses, right? It's just so we're clear, that type of thing generally does not happen overnight, right? But in the instance where like these things went away, it is unfathomable to me to think that someone would not, right? That the court would not step in as it has. Like, so the other thing to be clear is bankruptcy is a court proceeding. Like, you don't just declare bankruptcy like in your own business and liquidate your own assets. That is a thing you file a hearing for, right, in a legal system, right, and a judge administers it, and a judge signs off on it, and a judge and lawyers are involved in who gets what, like who gets paid. You know, like you can't pay all your debtors, you got to pay some of them, right? What your get out of jail free card is, right? That's why it has like a 7-year, I forget what it's a 7-year, and then there's another like time period where it's handled, but it's a legal proceeding, right? It is a court system legally codified event. So in the instance that something that big went away, it's unfathomable to me that a judge and all of the lawyers involved would not have hand and foot in adjudicating like where all this stuff was going to go. Like, I don't think that in any modern legal system that they would just allow billions of dollars of digital assets to just go poof overnight, and not taking into consideration that the consumers who had purchased that stuff had some right to access to it. You know, and not just the court and the legal system, but the FTC, right, as well, right here in America. So yes, yay, verily, like quite honestly, yes, the EULA that you sign says that you don't have any access to it, right? But because this isn't a cat that you kick out of your car, right, on the side of the highway and then just continue, you know, driving down the road.
What kind of family do you live in that you're just kicking cats out of cars? Yeah,
but I'm saying is because these things are just
specific.
These things are you're a dog, you know, whatever. My point is, they're not a bag of tricks. They're not something that you abandon, right, and just vacate and go on about your business without anybody else being involved, right? So this was my point, and so the disagreement was that, like, you know, you have no rights. You know, the EULA that you sign. Yes, I understand that. However, because of the fact that this thing does not go down without other people being involved, without a judge presiding over it, without lawyers being involved, I think it is highly unlikely that that scale of an event would be allowed to happen without any intervention. And it has happened before for digital content that was worth significantly less than what people have purchased from PlayStation, Xbox, or Steam. So that's where I stand. So that was the discussion. Should we go on with the show?
No, I mean, we've talked about, you know, the changing in physical media versus digital media a couple of weeks ago. So this is a really good follow-up of what has happened in the past and what is most likely to happen, because there is a market for somebody to step in. So it was well worth diving into for the first 15 minutes of the show. So thanks, Game Logic, and thank you, Hero Down Under, for bringing it up.
Yeah, and I will try and get off of it. I'll add one thing, because I hear what Hero's saying now. People were saying users lose everything, and I suspect it was more complex than that. That's why I asked the question. So I'm just going to be blunt, right? In my opinion, this is a problem that is happening now. There is a ton of, usually this is a term that we in the US apply to Europe. There's a lot of technophobia and tech fear that's going on right now, right? Just this presumption that corporate entities will abdicate and abandon and like you know, take access to your content away on a whim. There's a ton of fear mongering that's going on, and it's not just about the digital media thing, right? It's the fact that the media literally runs a news story every 2 days saying that blah 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 component or blah 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 piece of electronic or blah 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 whatever is going to increase in price. Like, literally, they've been running this news story every 2 days, and I'm like, in fact, the Xbox prices just increased on August 1. The news media was running stories that, you know, Xbox increased prices, and I'm like, oh my god, did they increase prices again? No caveat around it. No, like, hey, the price increases that they announced 2 or 3 months ago just went into effect today. No, it just said Xbox raises prices. So I'm scrambling around trying to find out if they raise prices again. They hadn't. It's just that the ones that they already announced. So there's tons of this, right, going on. And what people are doing is they are jumping to the conclusion that physical is better than digital, right? Period. And what I wrote in this article, as we saw in the network outages, is even if you have a piece of physical media, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to play that game when the network goes down. And the reason is because, and this was the thing I was trying to say to you today, too, Hero. Again, not saying to you because you were wrong about it, but just kind of presenting, like, the root of the problem is not, like, what you get on the disc. What you get on the disc is essentially a license key, which, let's talk about enterprise software like Siemens or SAP, right? They will often issue their license keys on a fob, and what you have on a Blu-ray is nothing different. It's just the license key, right? Whereas with a digital thing, like, your license key will be like written onto the hard drive, right? But regardless of that fact, if your cached entitlement to that physical disc has expired, you still are going to have to check in. It doesn't matter that you have it on physical disc, because what you're checking in against is you're checking against your digital ID and your account, right? That it's tied to. So this is the problem. The problem is not as much digital versus physical. The problem is that for over a decade now, you have a digital ID. You exist as a digital entity, as an NPE, right? And not what we call a non-person entity, right? I'm sorry, not a non-person entity, as a person entity, right? But the point is that you have a digital realization of yourself, right, on that platform. And that digital identity is tied to a piece of hardware. This is why you have to designate which of your consoles is your primary console. This is why you can not play a game, right, on I don't remember exactly how it works, but you can't play a game. You guys might remember you can't play a game on a secondary console when there are different. I don't know. There's different conditions under which you can't play a game on a secondary console, right?
If you don't have an internet connection, or if it's streaming on another console, like, there's lots of, depending on your platform, yeah, there's always some type of check on that.
Right. So PlayStation has a workaround. You can actually spawn PlayStation. It's not a PlayStation identity. You can actually spawn a local profile that remains ensconced entirely on that piece of hardware forever and all time. It's a convoluted process, right? You have to know exactly what you're doing. There's no real way to do that on Xbox. But my point is that you have a digital identity that's tied to the digital identity of a console, and both of those things have associations to games. And all of those things traverse some complex web mesh of identity, authentication, and access, and entitlements, and licensing. And when any of that breaks, you can lose content. You can lose access to your content, whether you have the physical disc or not. And this is what I was saying in the Discord today. Like, if you at a moment, let's say PlayStation goes black, right, on a given day, gone forever. The games that you have access to, because remember, you're not playing your game off your disc. Your disc is just an installation medium, at least to start. You have the license key and you have the installation executable. And right now in today's regime, you don't know. So let me say this: you have the license, the installation executable, and you might have some number of the assets that have to be unpacked to deploy to install the game. But in many cases, today, the problem is you may not have all of the assets. You may have none of the assets. You may not even have the installation executable, right, on the thing. The thing might just be a license key, right, in a very small script that tells it to phone home, get the installation executable, and stream it to your SSD the exact same way that a digital game does. So my point is, we live in this highly convoluted time, and Hero, you said that's not what I meant to bring up. You said the thing exactly correctly. People were saying users lose everything, and here's my big problem: there's nothing right now today that is that binary. Everything is super convoluted and super complex, and the day it happens, you're not gonna know exactly what you can play and what you can't, and what you have access to and what you don't. unless you're playing a retro console like a TurboGrafx or a Neo Geo or a Super Nintendo, or an SNES, right? Anything that you have where when you booted up that console for the first time, it asks you to create a user account. You have crossed the threshold into the post-internet world. Things are very complicated. And what I will say is, just because you have a game on a piece of physical media, you are not insulated from your ability to game being disrupted in the event that you lose internet connectivity. And I think that's the big problem, right? There is this thing going around when these network outages happen, and that's why I wrote this article that we're like, oh well, if I have all my stuff on physical media, then I'm good. No, you're actually not, right? And saying that you're good is spreading a false pretense. At any rate, on to games, unless you guys want to add anything to all that.
No, I think that's a good analysis and a good kind of gut check in terms of as we talked about, right? Like, just because you have the disc, and just because as Hero said in his chat, right, he sold off all his physical product discs, right? The idea of you may own a disc, but that doesn't mean that the game is all there. And so I think, and this is relevant to this week's news, where you had Sony come out and say they haven't seen a whole lot of impact and they're going to move forward cautiously with this, but still moving forward. And so having the space to kind of unpack that a little bit and not just report out on what's being said, but what's the impact of that, and what's the, you pull that thread long enough. This is what you brought up, Game Logic, is a meaningful conversation in terms of what can happen, and it helps frame the kind of knee-jerk reaction, headline grabbing stories around this.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Tao, anything you wanted to add?
I think on the flip side of that too, that kind of showed us this past week with Xbox's outage, where people were reporting that they couldn't, even though they had a physical disc, they couldn't play them because obviously they couldn't do that check-in because they had internet, but Xbox's systems were having issues. So kind of validates that point of it too.
Okay. Well, thanks for bringing that up here. Thanks, DBQ and Tao, for giving me the grace to kind of spool through some of that. On to segment 1, the main GX stories for tonight. I won't delay further by mentioning that I went to see Spider-Man Brand New Day, because that normally would have been the reason why the show would have started 25 minutes late.
Because we would have been talking about Brand New Day and everything else. Yeah, no, fair enough. Yep.
So I started Mixtape. I started on my Steam Deck LCD. So I was kind of tooling around this weekend, wanted to pop it in and play it. I think I had it already installed on the LCD and had previously planned on starting it earlier, but hadn't. The thing I will say about the game is quaint. There are some things. It's a visual novel, essentially. There are some very neat things from a design perspective that the game does, and one of those things that I think is so sublime with the game is that it is all about vibe, and the design approach to it is so, I don't know what to call it, like intentful, purposeful, beautiful, delivered so well, in that they are very, very, very careful about disrupting the vibe. And so one of the first things that happens in the game is you go into where it gives you control, is it goes into a downhill skate mini game. And they do not bring up any control prompts on the screen for quite some time. And because they don't, you just kind of start interacting with the game, and it's super intuitive. And the effect of that is that, and this goes on throughout the game, is there are these moments in time when you get lost in the music, and you get lost in the vibe, and you get lost in that feeling of summertime, graduating from high school, right? Being with your friends for the last time. And it is so eloquent in design language and how they deliver that feeling, that I don't know if I want to say it's unprecedented, but it is super specific to the genre that they're implementing, right? And so in a very self-facing way, the development team is like super conscious and aware of what it is that they were doing in a way that transcends like a lot of other games that are made today. That is probably my biggest compliment to the game right now. One of the things I don't want to say that I don't like about the game, but and this is what happens when you play a Zeitgeist game and you come to it late, is there's a lot of goings on about how the soundtrack was recognizable, and even if it wasn't relatable because you didn't have like a cultural tether to it, you would still kind of like you would recognize, oh yeah, the no offense to anybody, but like the white kids that I went to school like listened to that like music, right? Yeah, no, I know none of these bands. I haven't heard, like I heard Devo was like the one, like everything else is so far off the beaten path and would have been in like the indie section of Tower Records that it's again, I recognize kind of the vibe and kind of the thematic kind of music of the time, but like actual like recognition of these tunes, like none whatsoever.
I think that's a really good point. Like speaking as a white kid in the 90s and the 80s, right? Like that's spot on. That it invokes the musical styles of that time, but is not necessarily like I didn't have strong connections to it. There were parts of the music that I recognized. There were other parts that I did not know at all, but the vibe that it creates. And I think that that's, as Real Nate says, and actually Real Nate and Hero Down Under, we had a conversation about it on this show when it first came out, of like, it doesn't necessarily, it captures a vibe and not necessarily a specific time and place, because of the mixture of 80s, 90s musics, because of it kind of being the John Hughesification of, or the, name a early 90s indie movie about coming of age stories, right? Like it has those vibes without necessarily trying to be a specific place and time. It is about a feeling and an experience more than it is about a place and time.
And you really nailed it on the head there. It feels kind of like you're in a John Cusack movie, like the whole time, right? Now, on that theme, I will say that a thing that I don't like and is a negative for me for the game is the game very hyper focuses that these kids are always looking for booze, right? And I know that and that's, to me, that's a very polarizing like childhood image, right? I know that was normative for some childhood upbringings. I know it was vastly non-normative, right, for other childhood upbringings. And so it's a risky story element, right? Because that, more so than the music, is what makes the game unrelatable, right, for me, because that just wasn't my child upbringing, right? Like so like that it's a problem for me in kind of the drum beats of the story, because there's a chunk of the story that you feel like, yeah, no, and Hero, that's like that was a disruption for me, right? Because I go into the game and I'm like, well, I would have thought there would have been kind of like some crossover tunes, right, that were kind of common hits across multiple diverse cultures, and there's not anything crossover that I've been exposed to.
No, and I would say narratively, I get it from a narrative standpoint, because what the main character is supposed to be this kind of mixologist, right? This person who is putting together the perfect blend of songs, but is also the person that if you would have talked to in high school, you would have been totally irritated, because they would have told you about this band that nobody else knew about, and they would judge you for not knowing about it, right? Like,
here's the thing, TBQ. This is the person would have been so far out of whack that they would have told you Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins were sellouts and mainstream.
Yes, yep.
Right, and that's kind of my problem with. I'm like, at least there should be some Nirvana in here, right? So like a band that I recognize, right? You know, so I don't know. Sorry, go
I know
ahead.
adults that do that now. Punish you for not knowing a band. I'm like, come on, dude. I don't care. Just listen to music.
Yeah. Fair enough. No, I think it really is. The conversation that Real Nate brought up at the time when it came out really made me go, when I went back to it to finish it, I looked at it through a different lens of trying to like treat it as a nostalgic kind of experience and more about the emotional interplay that they're trying to create between the characters. And so I can also say that I did not necessarily hunt around my siblings' room to find out if they had booze stashed somewhere, right? Like that's not an experience that I would relate to, but that idea of kids in different dynamic relationships trying to not only fit in but also stand out and decide their own identities, is that part I felt is probably the stronger part of the game, more so than like any one song that tugged at a heartstring.
Yeah, I mean, I love the depth of like digging at the music. Like I am a big soundtrack guy, right? And so one of the things that I loved was the main character Stacy / Rocky pointing out that that like there's tons of music that goes unused on music soundtracks, right? That is composed and performed but never put on the soundtrack, which I knew. But then she had like found it and burned it to a CD. So I'm like, oh wait a minute, like that stuff is out there, like you can go find it. So that so that may kick off like a new treasure hunt for me. But like I said, part of the problem in the dynamic for me so far is that there's points where the story feels very much like why am I forgetting the name of the movie? I've been saying it all weekend. Jeez, what is Matthew Broderick?
Ferris Bueller?
Yes, there's a lot of the time that it feels like kind of like a Ferris Bueller vibe, right? And then, but Ferris Bueller was not a movie about like the kids going crazy and drinking, right? Like it was just about them being rebellious. So then it goes into the like drinking, looking for booze, and then it starts sliding into this thing of feeling like dazed and confused, right? Or Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and then I'm like what is there? It feels like when it does that, they're trying to navigate this vibe between the two, and I'm like, no, I'd kind of rather you be one or the other, you know. But that all being said, it's thoroughly enjoyable so far. I recognize the game for what I know. It's not going to be a gamey game. Like I know it's not going to be, adrenaline, leaning forward, controller on your hands, elbows on your knees kind of thing. So for that, it's pretty cool. The thing you mentioned about the sister, it is endearing to me that because the character up through that point seems like she is someone who not have gotten along with her sister. I would have assumed that like the sister, what is that? Now I'm thinking of another movie. Robert De Niro, Ben Stiller,
Meet the Fockers?
Yes, Meet the Fockers. So kind of the sister who's getting married then is kind of presented as like the goody two shoes, right? And like she's the youngest sister and she's like the daddy's little girl type person. And so I would have thought that like, okay, the sister would have been like the straight A student, and that's part of the reason why Rocky is so rebellious. But it turns out the sister was also, with the crowd and like the booze seeking, thing. So, but it was very endearing to hear like, okay, so all of these kids grow up in this, smoking pot, looking for booze kind of, high school society, but they still some of them still graduate and go on to college and obviously start being pointed in the vector of like becoming, contributing members of society. So that part of the story is kind of a nice little thing, like to acknowledge that they do grow out of this, right? So that they're not all destined to, be, pumping gas at their local high school town, so yeah. So I'm having a good time. Like I said, it's a very vibe-tastic kind of story, and I'm glad that I'm playing it. It won't be my feeling of like a game of the year or anything like that, but it's an enjoyable piece of content.
Yeah, no, after finishing it, and I enjoyed it, but it is, I think, Hero's statement of all the 10 out of 10s, right? Like it, I appreciate what it's trying to do, and I love the fact that people are attempting this and continue to attempt it in different ways within video games as a medium, because these are types of stories that have lived in novels and movies for so long. So I appreciate what it's done, even if it isn't necessarily, doesn't resonate completely with every single player. But I think that's the truth of kind of, narrative fiction, that it doesn't always resonate with everybody.
Okay, Tal. You've got a couple games you want to go through here at the top.
One quick question for either of you, since you obviously both played it. Is the setting or the city or town they live in, is it a fictional town or is it like a known town state, like area?
I don't know about the town, but they're West Coast. Are they Oregon or Washington State? Because I've seen the map for their summer road trip, and I know they go south to go right to California. So they're either I think they're in Oregon, which is another thing that like flipped my lid. I'm like, you guys are not Oregon, but I think they're near Seattle. But I'm like, you guys are near Seattle, and there's like no Nirvana. Like, what's going on here? So yeah. But they're upper Northwest Pacific.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at I looked up the playlist too for the game, and there was like maybe 4 bands that I actually knew, that I heard of on there. But I don't really know band names sometimes, so it's possible I probably heard some of these songs more. I just don't recognize like the names. Maybe they're like One Hit Wonders and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it was something I was actually interested in. So maybe at some point, I will.
Yeah, I think nowadays you can find it for like $15, and I think that's a reasonable price, right? Like for the experience and the story that it tells, like a $15 on sale is not bad.
And then going back to Real and Nate's comment about excuse me, all the 10 out of 10s, I'm pretty sure that's probably because like the reviewers were probably all 80s, 90s kids, so that kind of hit them in the feels there. Probably more than likely. But anyways, so I have two games here pretty quick. I went back to Mario Strikers Battle League, playing that on the Switch too, but that was I believe an original Switch game, system game. So this one, and I completely forgot, but there's like no story mode in this game, like not like some of the other sports games like golf and tennis. You pretty much just there's just like a tournament cup that you can go through, and then online that you can do with the Battle League, where I guess there's like seasonal like tournaments and stuff or something. I haven't even dipped my toes into that, but I was just jumping into the different cups. I just did some quick battles just to get used to the controls again. It had been a long time since I played this game, probably since the first month or so that had come out, and I had to get used to it again. I was getting my butt kicked. Actually, I'm assuming I didn't see it at first, or I haven't seen it or even looked for it, but I'm assuming you can play around maybe with the difficulty level, because I was getting my butt kicked pretty hard on those first few games until I finally figured out all the controls and stuff. So once I did that, then I jumped into the actual tournament or the cups, the different battle cups. I beat the first one. I think there's like 6 maybe or so. So I beat the first one. Now the second one's starting to give me trouble. So I'm assuming the opponents will just get harder and harder as you go along. And this is soccer, football, however you want to wherever you are in the world. 4-on-4. You're battling here, so pretty fun. Obviously, this is the Mario game. You got all the power ups during the gameplay. So there'll be like little question blocks that pop up, and you can hit those. There's other like little balls that kind of give you a little bit of a boost in power and stuff too that you can pick up. So it's pretty interesting because I believe you can only use the power once until you hit another question block. So it's kind of that chess play where you gotta figure out when you want to use those powers and when is a good time. You have obviously passing, kicking, and there's a dodge button, and kind of like the other ability is not really a dodge. It's more of like you kind of kick the ball forward. So like if someone's kind of gonna tackle you, that ball will still be going forward, so somebody else can try to grab it. So fairly simple controls, but trying to use all those at once when there's shells and banana peels and bombs flying around, it can be pretty hectic sometimes, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. I've actually been played a lot of that the last probably like 3 or 4 days. So that's probably been one of my main games the last few days. And then the other one is Snipper Clips, which I've actually been playing with my I've been playing with my wife, so some family gaming here. Well, we were looking for another game to play other than like we play like Dr. Mario and like I mentioned before, we played Halo, some other kind of just like board games like Monopoly and stuff like that, but digitally that I have on Xbox or Nintendo. But I actually totally forgot I had gotten Snipper Clips. I think actually at the end of last year I was going to play when we were on vacation, but I never did. We never got a chance just because we were busy. So got that going. So it's a little puzzle game. You're like these two little characters, kind of like bullets, I guess. You kind of rounded on one end and flat on the other, and you kind of have a little bit of a long body, and then you just get like different puzzles throughout the little board that you have that you can choose from. Some of it's just like, hey, I got to get a basketball, something simple like I got to get a basketball into the hoop, or there's a bunch of fish that I got to get from one side of the screen to the other, something like that. But you can actually clip each other's, which is where the title comes in. You can clip the body of the other player. So if you need, you can like make a scoop, or I think there was a balloon one too. You pop a balloon, so you kind of clip it, so there's like a point at the end of one of the characters. So I would like to say, I'm happy to say, we're still married, because there's some tense moments there where we're kind of going back and forth with each other, trying to figure out how to do a puzzle, or just how to clip each other so we can do the certain things. But she was really enjoying it, so that's good to know. So I gotta try to find some more maybe kind of puzzly games that we can kind of play together. Yeah, so those are the two, the one kind of newish game, I guess, Snipper Clips, at least new for me, new for us, and then Mario Strikers that we've been playing lately.
Snipper Clips is fun. Snipper Clips was a first weekend purchase back in 2017 for my family when we purchased the Switch, right? Yeah, and it's one that you could come back to occasionally. Having two kids trying to figure out the puzzles and not get angry with each other, that was part of the parenting challenge of that. It was better than any Mario Party game ever, but no, it's a really inventive puzzle game, and yeah. It's very simple in terms of its graphical style, but it actually can get kind of demanding, and so that's fun that you played it co-op with your wife.
Yeah, I think you can play up to 4, right? I believe. I think there was more. Because I
remember
seeing that and I was like, wow, that'd be kind of difficult with 4 people, some of these puzzles. But
yes,
and also I believe there's
intentional griefing that could go on there as well.
Yeah, there's some DLC too for it, so maybe I'll pick that up too once we're done with the main game.
So Tal, one question I wanted to ask, so because I'm horrible about Nintendo first party games, Mario Strikers Battle League, is that the new game that came out in February? About like there's some like academy, like it's a school and it's like an academy that you go through, or was that a tennis game?
That was a tennis game.
Okay,
yep.
Gotcha.
Which you played, right, Tao?
Yeah, I played the tennis one. Yeah, I've been playing. Actually, well, I didn't put it on here, but I went back to the tennis and the golf one. Golf one was just pissing me off because I'm stuck on a level right now, and I don't know how to get past it. So I was like, all right, I'm done with this. So I was playing tennis too for a little bit, but then I saw that I had Mario Strikers. I was like, oh, those had always been. I'd played previous, the Mario soccer games, so I wanted to jump.
This was a 2022 game.
Yeah. Also, not as far back as I thought, actually.
Hey, just one heads up. There is a major thunderstorm going on here, so if I lose connectivity, you guys are encouraged to continue rolling.
Okay. Yeah, you stuttered a little bit there. So
yeah, there's been a couple times where you kind of froze for a second. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. DBQ, you got a game?
Yeah. Well, let's keep moving for the sake of weather. My game is a quick little game. So last summer I played a deck building basketball game called Clutch Time, which I talked about. Played a bunch on the deck, the Steam Deck, for a deck builder game. And then this past week on July 24th, so I guess a little over a week now, a game called Hard Count came out, which is a deck builder, or at least a card battler type of game around American football. It's created by one guy who goes under the studio name of Going Yumbo. The individual creator is Riley Dirksen. He's done a couple other games. He did a rugby goblin game back in 2018. I didn't even know the game called Hooptown Hero, which is like a roguelike basketball game in 2024. And so this is very simple, kind of 16-bit graphics. But the idea is that you've got 4 or 5 kind of slots in your deck to play. And you're, depending on how you arrange your so you have an offensive lineman, a running back, quarterback, tight end, and wide receivers. And they have different levels of 1 to 12, I think I've seen so far, in terms of levels of power. And then that determines their power. And then depending on where you place them in the order of your play, that you can, putting a running back and a offensive lineman together can, provides a run block, and putting 2 wide receivers together can give you a boost. Putting a offensive lineman and a tight end together can give you an additional blocker at the line. And so you do need to its tutorial is okay. It crashed a few times on Steam Deck, but it's playing pretty well on PC. And I think I'm still trying to figure out some of the strategy behind it. Like I've made it through a couple different games. And so basically you're not playing defense at all. You're only playing offense. And there you have, as the quarters go on, the defense that you're playing against has a certain number of kind of power that you're trying to beat with your cards. But also depending on the defense, and they start to get, depending on your opponent, they start to get basically kind of sabotage cards that will end up in your deck, like a quarterback with a 0 rating or a lineman with a 0 rating. And so it'll stick in your deck, and it will prevent other cards, from filling your deck, but you can play it, but then it isn't going to be worth anything and might impact the success of the play you're trying to run. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Like it's not super complicated. It's also like, I think I paid $6 for it, so it's not like it's super expensive. But it's a fun, just like the basketball game last year. I think the basketball game Clutch Time does a much better job at this, because Clutch Time, you're not only playing offense, but you're playing defense. And depending on what defense you leave up in Clutch Time, that's the other team's, first line of, it's your, your shields in Hearthstone, or something like that, where you have a defense that's built up. Clutch Time is a much deeper card battler game, at least from what I've seen so far in hard count. But hard count really kind of scratches an itch in terms of thinking about American football in a strategic way rather than kind of an action oriented type of way. So, and you can even there's little icons that you could, it's X's and O's, or it's helmets in different colors, or it even has like a little, electronic football characters, like the kind like back in the 70s where you would put your characters on this metal mat and plug it in, and it would just vibrate, and people would, right? So it's having some fun with its theme. And it is something where I'll be curious to see if if there are some updates that address some of the clarity in terms of how the strategy plays out. But for $6, I'm enjoying it.
All right, so you got any questions? Okay, let's go ahead and roll on to segment number 2, our main news headlines. And DBQ, you have the first news story in the rundown.
Yeah, actually, this ties in pretty well, because, I'm kind of looking for another American football game to play, one that's not owned by Saudi Arabia. And so that is our first news story here, is that coming off from Rock, Paper, Shotgun, from Mark Warren. It's a number of other places have had some analysis and updates around it. Basically, at the end of last month, or at the end of July, that the Saudi Arabian Silver Lake PIF the Saudi Arabia PIF, the private investment fund, Silver Lake, and the Affinity Partners, which is a founded investment firm from Jared Kushner, they are expected to the 94 or the complete kind of privatization of EA is expected to be finalized by the end of next week. So this is the beginning of August. At the end of July, as of July 30th, all regulatory approvals required to complete the merger have been obtained, EA wrote. That kind of the last big one that was waiting on was coming out of the EU. And the EU, basically it passed its regulatory scrutiny this past week. And so what that means is the $55 billion deal, which the Saudi Arabian PIF will acquire 93.4% of EA, and the other 6.6% will be owned by Silver Lake, and the Affinity Partners will be completed. And so I think, this is in previous years when we saw acquisitions like the Activision King Blizzard with Microsoft drag out in courts for multiple years and all kinds of regulatory questions to scrutinize that merger. Currently, that is not the case that is happening here. And partly in America, that is partly because of the current administration, and that it was a different administration when the Activision Blizzard King Microsoft acquisition went through. And on the EA end, it is not about the real kind of regulatory challenges that came up during the Activision King Blizzard stuff was around kind of monopolies of the market. And this is not the case because EA is not, while it is a major publisher, it is not the potential for a monopoly. And so you had, there has been some pushback. This article talks about 46 U.S. lawmakers signed a letter to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission in America, expressing concerns. You've had the United Video Game Workers, CWA, had a statement back last October. And so I think this was always an inevitability. I never had any expectation or illusion that this would not go through. I think the real piece of the analysis that I find most useful came out of Video Game Industry Memo from George Osborne. There we go. I'll throw it in the chat here because I didn't add it to I'll put it in the underneath here because it came to me as something I forgot that I had signed up for. But Video Game Industry Memo, again, is kind of a business analysis aspect of it. And what this points out is something that places like GameIndustry.biz and Stephen Totillo and some other places were talking about last winter when this was first announced. But the kind of big video game centric challenge, right? Like I have issues with this because of the political aspects of it, and we'll take that piece out of it. But the big kind of economic video game industry aspect of this is that $20 million needed to be borrowed in order to complete this purchase. So that there is a 20 million, JP Morgan provided $20 billion, 20 billion, sorry, make sure I got the B rather than the M, right? 20 billions in debt financing to JP Morgan. And so the challenge, and this, I think Jason Schreier also talked about this with time as well, is right that the challenge of EA as a company having debt service of $20 billion on top of trying to make a profit and paying off that debt service, like what that looks like in terms of the amount of capital they have to invest in game development or the amount of willingness that they have to invest in games that may not hit big, or as we talked about, as you two talked about a couple weeks ago when I wasn't on, right around all the controversy and headlines around EA microtransactions in the single player aspects of college football. And you had another report coming out this week that they're looking to do the same thing for Madden in their superstar mode, but are coming out ahead of it. And kind of the internal reports are the thinking is not necessarily that the microtransactions exist, it's that they didn't communicate those microtransactions ahead of time. So more and more aspects, and you've got things, the play tests within FC 27 for soccer and football, that they've added the new underground or the new kind of playground area where you've got the ability, kind of like the My City aspects in 2K. And there's going to be the potential for microtransactions in lots of different areas. So I think, if you as a company have $20 billion of debt service that you need to be paying down or writing off in some way, right? Like, as we talked about this during when it first launched, when this news first came out back in the winter, late in 2025, that idea of, do you see more EA originals? Do you see more, what happens to Hazelight Studio? Do they find a different publisher? Is EA going to be willing to back some of these smaller bets? Is EA going to be willing to sink, 8 to 10 years in a BioWare developed game that may or may not hit in the same way that a constant revenue stream of their sports titles or The Sims will? And so the fact that this is going through is news because it is imminent. It will be finalized, or it is expected to be finalized at the end of the first week in August. And then the real questions start in terms of, what does this mean for EA as a company? What does it mean for the IPs that EA owns? And then what does that mean for us as players who may have enjoyed those kind of offshoots of EA, those kind of smaller items and IPs?
Very cool. Tal, any comments?
I think let's hit Hero Down Unders. Like you pulled it up there, right? Like whether EA keeps their relationship with Hazelight, or Hazelight has a strong enough reputation that I believe completely that they would find a publisher somewhere for those Hazelight games.
Well, and that's that's the critical question, right? Is are we going to see all of the decisions being made squarely centered around profitability, right? And good business ventures, or are we going to see, right, a moral and ethical regime kind of creep into this? Trying to figure out a way to say this tactfully.
While you think of a way to think of it tactfully, I will say, right, like I think a word like a moral and ethical regime it could mean lots of different things, right? Like you could take that in one direction, given that 94% of this company will be owned by Saudi Arabia. But I even think like moral and ethics within any type of corporate entity has the potential to raise questions. Right. Or we've had this conversation about capitalism versus kind of what people may feel is ethical behavior.
Well, and I should have said moral or ethical. I should have said value based, right?
Sure.
So,
right.
Are we going to see decisions that get made about content that are aligning to Saudi values? And so the tactful thing I was trying to think of to say is that there is a difference between values as practiced by certain Middle Eastern states in the Arabian Gulf. And there will often be a difference in how those value-based decisions are carried beyond the horizon, right? There's a saying in Muslim countries, particularly amongst males, that Muhammad cannot see what you do over the horizon, right? That his sight is limited to, right, the geographic area that you're in. And so often there is a different way that people behave when they're out of the country than they behave, such as on business travel, than they behave than when they are in the country. So there's kind of that question, right, to see, how is that type of behavior like going to be reflected in the business? Will it be reflected in the business, or will the business align to, right? Will we see value-based decisions about content aligning to Saudi values, based on their internal, religious government regime, non-secular government. So there's that, it's just a question, or simply, as you were, I think, as where you were heading, DBQ, right? Isn't it simply a matter of, those things may not be as profitable, right, as other ventures? And I know here what you're saying is they've always exceeded sales expectations. That doesn't necessarily mean, right, within total cost accounting, right, internally in the company, like how profitable they are, and whether or not, the PIF sees them as profitable, right, as these other sports franchises. And so, for instance, very easy for me to see, like, what do you guys mean you gave up the FIFA license, right? What do you guys mean you think you're bigger than FIFA? No, go get that license back, right? What do you mean you gave up the WRC license? Like, no, go get every sports license that you can, right? That is your bread and butter. And they don't have everything, right? There's some things that they don't have. So, we'll see. I don't know.
No, I mean, I think there's so many questions still, and I'm sure we'll talk about this as we see some of these ramifications. And as Hero says, how much will change quickly, how much is not going to change. I think one of the conversations around this is how much of this will be about trying to secure a certain level of revenue, and how much will this be around kind of soft power and influence, right? Where before the PIF, as they purchased, the Live Golf and other types of things, but they've shut down Live Golf, or they're divesting from it, right? Like, they've moved away from some of these aspects, and they've kept some, as they've sponsored football clubs in other countries. Qatar Airlines is another example of this, right? Like, how much of this is something where it becomes normalizing that this is just Saudi Arabia. They're supporting the things you love, so it's okay. We won't ask other questions. Or how much of it is kind of moralizing, where they are pushing forth individual beliefs out in their way. And I would anticipate that it is more likely that it is kind of normalizing than it is trying to thrust any type of certain belief. But we will see. And again, I don't even know if that's a good thing, right? Like, that may be the direction I think they go, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's good for us as gamers, or in a marketplace.
Alrighty. Cal, you've got the next story?
Yes, this is from Ars Technica from Kyle Orland. Microsoft brings original backward compatibility to Windows PC. For years, Microsoft leaned heavily into extensive backwards compatibility, which I believe they had stopped doing actually a little while ago, on consoles at least, across multiple generations of Xbox hardware as a major selling point for the consoles today. And this was back on the 22nd, actually. That effort expands past the console ecosystem, making a select original Xbox titles officially playable and purchasable on Windows PCs for the first time. The first four titles that they will be kicking this off with is Blinks, the Time Sweeper, Conquer Live and Reloaded, Crimson Skies, High Road to Revenge, and Fusion Frenzy. PC players can download each title for $10, but those with Xbox Game Pass subscription or existing digital license for these games on consoles will have an instant access without any additional purchases. Excuse me. No such luck if you simply stick an original Xbox disc in your PC drive. If anybody even has a PC drive anymore, I don't even know if they come with them. Playing these old titles, PC enabled some bonus graphical features like VSync support, anthroposcopic filtering, enhanced anti-aliasing, and up to 4 times resolution scaling of the original SD signal, which is 2560 by 1920. Games are limited to the original frame rates and aspect ratios, though, which means that 30 frames per second and 4:3 image in most cases. Microsoft says that first batch of games should be playable with an 11-year-old GTX 950 graphics hardware, but recommends a 2017 era GTX 1070 Ti with 8 gigs of VRAM, for best performances. I didn't see any mention of how and when they'll expand this, but I mean, I figured it's most of these games are for stuck on Xbox in the first place, so I figured it was a pretty decent deal for PC players, I guess, to have some fun with these games going forward.
Yeah, these were games that you could purchase through the Xbox store for modern consoles, but I think it's the first time that they're available on PC in some ways. So
yeah.
So help me out with the title selection. Look, I love the idea of getting my hands on Crimson Sky's High Road to Revenge on PC. I'm a little not hype about playing it in 4:3 aspect ratio at 30 frames per second. It had, that title pick had the potential to kind of like be an exquisite experience, but it's hearing that it's not going to move any further technologically, it creates a bit of a problem. I'm sure that some of these titles were picked just because they were technically feasible, right? And it was kind of a weighted shortest job first type of thing. But isn't Fusion Frenzy like Power Stone? Like, isn't it like a multiplayer, like a party game thing?
Yeah, I know it's a party game. Yeah,
it's a party game, kind of like
multiplayer
game show type of thing. Yeah.
The multiplayer is not going to be enabled on this, is it?
I didn't mention it in the article, but I would assume it would probably be. I mean,
I know that you can play Fusion Frenzy, and it has been on Xbox for years.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's servers up where it is the online multiplayer, but I think actually, this. Yeah, I don't know. I do not know about that. I think the other ones make a lot of sense.
Question.
In some ways, to me, all 4 of these make sense of these are franchises that they're not necessarily coming back to, that they own, that they don't have to spend anything to relicense. And the tech has probably been there because it's already been on Xbox. And it almost feels like this is more kind of ground setting, foundation setting for what comes next in Xbox by bringing over things and saying these play on PC. Then it is like this is a whole new backwards compatibility path that they're going down. I think, and the article talks about, and their press release also mentions it, right? Like they specifically highlight handhelds in this as well, right? And so it is about bringing it to kind of console related markets that may not necessarily be traditional PCs.
One might almost think and say and insinuate almost as if they're prepping to move their user base over to PC.
I think one could make that assumption. Yes.
Wow. Yes. Even themselves have said that. So in some way or another, maybe not directly, but
so Tao, I think you have the next one as well.
Yes, this is from Shack News from TJ Denzer. Unity is supplying Netflix games with a dedicated engine. Unity has been using several Netflix games launched already, and Night School Studios using its engine in its latest projects. Unity and Netflix games have deepened their relationship this week as Unity announced a new dedicated engine for Netflix that'll be used in their latter's upcoming projects. In some cases, is already set. So they've been using Unity in some of the games that they've already released for Netflix. So some of the like Netflix original series, so like Black Mirror, Unhinged, which I'm not sure what Unhinged is, and then Squid Games Unleashed. Those all use Unity. And then now going forward, Night School Studios, who did the Oxenfree series, and After Party, which I'm not sure what After Party is. I don't. DB, do you know what? Do you remember what After Party is?
Yeah, it was another narrative game. You're kind of, a narrative adventure game, similar, different theme than Oxenfree and Oxenfree 2, but in that kind of you're moving in a 3D, 2D type of space, but moving from conversation to conversation.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So the new engine will be serve as a specially tooled basis for further games going forward. So it's pretty interesting that they're not only using new Unity, but like a special, I'm assuming some kind of modified Unity engine for these games that are coming up. They don't mention what the games are, but they're obviously working on some stuff. Probably, I would assume related to the TV shows, on Netflix, or movies possibly. But it could be like totally original titles too. They, like I said, they don't mention specifically what the games will be. But Netflix getting more and more into games here. It looks like.
Yeah, it's kind of finally happening, right, from one aspect, but from another aspect, it could also be, getting ready to hit that inflection point where they're able to make like a serious push, right, and start having originally developed content, featured prominently, on their page. And I know that they've done original content, but I mean just like big, like larger scale, right?
Yeah.
Now that they have a dedicated engine just for them.
Yeah, I think
most of
those games. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, as we see from PGA Tour 2K25, right, the Unity engine can actually be used to render some pretty significant visuals.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think those games I had mentioned were all more like, pixel 16-bit kind of games. They weren't like anything major, 3D or anything like that. So maybe they'll be pushing forward. I've never played any of those games, but I have used the Netflix subscription, I guess if you want to call it that, because it kind of comes with your Netflix subscription just to play other games within the system. So I've never had any issues. So it's just a little bit like you said, finally, that there might be getting some more games coming through, and maybe something bigger.
Okay, going on to the next news story in the rundown. This news story over on Push Square. We are not seeing any impact on our business, Sony says. Sony says physical disc backlash is having zero effect. This news story by Sammy Barker. Speaking during its latest earnings call, Sony addressed the backlash to its decision to stop manufacturing physical discs. While it acknowledged the criticism of enthusiast fans, CFO Lin Tao showed no signs of the company even considering changing course, saying it's going to cautiously move this forward. There's been talk on social media boycotts, PlayStation Plus subscription cancellations, and more, but asked if the backlash was affecting its bottom line, the manufacturer said it's experiencing zero impact. At this point in time, we are not seeing any impact on our business, but going forward about the content sales, a large part is already digitized. And therefore, as a result of the discontinuation of discs, we don't see that there will be any negative impact on our business. However, as I already said, the users, the players have attachments, and we have to think about how to respond to that feedback. So a couple of angles on this. Number one, the quotation from the earnings call, wildly misquoted across the internet, wildly misquoted by sensationalist accounts on Twitter. Very often just not saying, right, and we've seen this, and like the frustrating thing for me about this was we saw this when Totoki made his statements over the last couple of years, to the extent that there were actually AI spoofed videos with AI generated voiceovers specifically saying what he actually had not said. Those were done by fans of other platforms who dislike PlayStation. The frustrating thing for me about this is these were pro PlayStation accounts that were running around misquoting, right, what was said. Like the correct quote is on GameIndustry.biz. I think Shinobi's Twitter account was one of the ones that put it out correctly. The other major disconnect that I have with how this was kind of spoken about on social media was this feeling like Lin Tao was supposed to say something different. I lost the lead on people not understanding that this is the corporate CFO. This is not. Wait. Hold on. I can't remember. Is she corporate or is she the PlayStation or is she the GNS division? Yeah, let me look. Or do one of you guys mind looking that up while I'm continuing on?
Yeah, I'll look it up while you go. I mean, I think your point, regardless of where they are, it's no Sony executive is going to walk that back, no matter what their position is.
Well, and yes, and then more specifically, I was like, there's this notion that like she was tone deaf. She's not talking to you. She's not answering a question for you. She's the CFO. She's actually during the earnings call, she's asking a question from investors who are the only people on the call who are allowed to ask questions, right? Who have their phone lines activated for input, which is only activated during the Q&A session, right? She's answering a question for the Berkshire Hathaways and the Warren Buffetts. She's not answering a question to gamers. She's not voice tracking for gamers. She's voice tracking to Wall Street.
Yep.
And so like a comment that I made over the weekend is like there is just way too much main character syndrome in social media. Like this feeling that like it's I have a longer lecture and a longer like scathing thing about this. I won't go into
Save
it tonight,
it for the
but,
beginning of the next episode, right?
Right.
We'll spend 15 minutes at the start of next episode. She is the chief financial officer and corporate executive for Sony Group Corporation. So not PlayStation specific,
Okay.
but Sony broader.
So she reports it to Toki, the CEO, right?
Yes.
So she's not even in GNNS. I can't remember who.
Right.
I think GNNS's CFO is actually a European lady, if I'm not mistaken. So again, like she's not answering a question for you. She's not trying to make a PR thing out of this. Like she is literally the chief bean counter of the corporate, right? And the one who was absolutely had part and parcel right in the decision making that went into this. So yeah, and like I said, I mean, and I think the last thing I will leave off and say, because again, this is a thing that I often get frustrated by, is gamers hyper focusing on PlayStation, and first of all saying, well, I mean, there's a whole physical contingent, right, who feels they're being abandoned, and I understand that. Again, I mean, I would understand, like, there's a feeling that they're being abandoned, and there's a feeling that PlayStation is focusing on certain content, microtransactions, game as a service, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, look, from a corporate perspective, if my ARPU of my customer base is $250 and the ARPU of the other customer base has historically for the last 5 years been $47, now with these extra 200 million people that Asha Sharma claims have come to the platform in the last year, and I diluted that and peanut buttered it out a little, they're down to about $42 being spent per consumer. There needs to be an understanding that from the business perspective, they probably don't care what they're playing, right? What they care about is that they want to maintain that ARPU. But like I said, the thing that I lose the thread on a lot is just that I don't know. Like I said, I think there was a lot of that was the other thing I was going to mention. Then like sensationalist headlines right throughout the games media. Sony finally breaks silence. No, Sony didn't finally break silence. They actually haven't broken silence from a social media perspective because people are still under orders to not discuss this topic. What happened was an earnings call, not a PR event, not a Samsung Galaxy Unpacked, right? Not an E3 presentation. Like, you guys need to stop hyper-focusing on everything that comes out is some type of gaming event, because it's not. It's an earnings call, entirely financial, entirely about driving the business. And now I remember the last thing I was going to say. And the last thing I would say is gamers keep hyper-focusing on what's going on in GNNS. I've said it a dozen times now. I'll say it for the 13th time. Take a look at the financials of what's going on in the other business groups at Sony outside of GNNS. In particular, there is one that you will see where you will see starkly different financial metrics, and things might start making sense to you. that if there is a business group that is wildly profitable in terms of growth in comparison to GNNS, you might start saying, maybe the corporation wants to spend money over there. And again, I'm not saying that that's going to make you happy, but a lot of people are trying to put the puzzle pieces together and try and come up with causality of why this is going on. That's really going to be difficult to do if you're only looking at the gaming and network segment, because that's not how corporations operate. That's not how Lin Tao is making decisions or Totoki's making decisions. So like you're trying to put together a puzzle piece with tunnel vision, and you're going to get it wrong. You guys are getting it wrong. Like I'm watching you put the puzzle pieces together and you're getting it wrong. So I don't know. Any other comments on this one?
No, I think if you loop this with the beginning of our conversation, at the beginning of the podcast, and I think that yes, I think that we've said a good amount on it, and I'm sure there will be more. But I think Game Logic's point of be aware of the audience, where these comments are coming from, and who they're intended for. Right, like even just looking up the CFO of Sony. My first couple Google results that weren't like specific to her title were Reddit threads about her being fired because she doesn't understand gamers, right? Like, yep. Take a minute, think about the audience. Like, still be upset. Like, I'm there with you. Like, but for different reasons, right? Like, understand the audience of who's being said and what, and also like, yes, just because you can say it doesn't mean you should.
The woman was literally a protege of Totoki's. Highly unlikely that she's getting fired. Probably she was specifically put in that position, right? Because she was handpicked by her mentor. So Hero Down Under, one of the things you're saying, the backlash was after the quarter being reported, right? So it was, again, I want to point back to the quote, because I think this is not you, but I think this is a significant misunderstanding, and the misquoting hasn't helped. The question she was asked was, are you guys seeing an impact to your business right now from the backlash? The announcement was made on July 1st. It has been a month since it was announced. So whether it was reported or not, she was asked if she's seeing an impact, and her answer to that was no. So what that tells, the way I read that, is that in the last month, in the walk up to, right, they're not seeing like any net huge amount, right, of negative impact from having made the announcement from a business perspective. Okay. Let's go on to segment 3. I don't know if the banner is accurate, but
right before we do that, let's pull up
Yeah.
Ramon Farrell's, because his last comment here. I think that's a huge piece of this, right? Like, there's an emotional core there. Like, we can understand it from an economic and business perspective, but yeah, I think you land right on it. So thanks for sharing that.
So, and I do appreciate that, and I understand it. I will talk through my difference in perspective. So, and this isn't what you said, Ramon. This is what another podcast I heard say today. Another podcast I heard say today made a comparison between how PlayStation is treating it versus Asha Sharma. So I will just say it bluntly. We have a cadre of game journalists or whatever, and kids in the gaming conversation who have grown up in this regime of Phil Spencer and think that the way Xbox over communicates about everything is the way gaming companies are supposed to talk to their consumers, and it's not. I could be wrong. I'm willing to be called out wrong. I don't think PlayStation has been ever in the mode of talking to consumers outside of the way they're communicating now, except for one time that I can think of, which was when they were communicating about the cross-play thing, and there were different executives making different comments every other day, and they were totally screwing it up. And it's one of the things I called out for them as bad performance and bad PR, is they were trying to make people feel better about the cross-play, and they were lying, because while while the whole crossplay thing was going on, they were saying A, it was too difficult for them to implement. B, they were blaming it on worrying about like other players from other platforms, like making it a toxic environment. And the reality that we found out years later is that what they were actually doing behind the scenes is they were actually negotiating for the off-platform revenue share clause that they put in place, where if you enable crossplay on PlayStation and they don't make 90% or something of the revenue, like in a month, and they get access to your financial records and are allowed to audit them, then you have to compensate them for the shortfall. Right. So that's what was actually going on. And then I would say a little back in the Kaz Hirai time during the PlayStation 3 generation, there was a very brief period, right? Because Kaz wasn't head of the division when that generation started. He was elevated to that, and then he was elevated to corporate CEO. And during that time in his regime, there was this kind of brief period of time where, at least with the media, right, when he was doing like interviews with PlayStation Beyond, right, with Colin and Greg, there's a brief period of time where there was a little more like friendlier like communication, and then they did the whole jokey thing right during the launch of the PlayStation 4. Right. But as far as the general way they communicate with consumers, it's very corporate and very sterile, and it has been 97% of the time for the last 20 years that I can remember. So to me, this doesn't feel like anything different. And absolutely, given like the flipping out and crashing out that's happening, I can also understand the rules of engagement they put down, like with their social media team. So that's just me, and my perspective could be wrong.
Yeah, I think this would be a good conversation to come back to in some capacity, because I personally feel that a low that I can't remember feeling for 2 decades with the game industry, right? In terms of the big name publishers and platform holders, and so yeah, I think the pushback is understandable. Whether or not to me, it's understandable, because if somebody has an issue with it, speak up, say something, but also, be informed when you're saying something. Going back to what we said in the very beginning, right? Do your research, do your work, understand the issue and the context if you're going to take objection to something.
Yeah, and the last thing I see some of the comments you guys are saying that, yes, we get that, but like, it was okay for them to do that when things were going well, where their release cadence was better. They were a little more jerky with the PS3 to PS4. Yes, I get that, and yes, I'll agree, right, in terms of, and I've said it before, they are coasting, right, to a certain degree, right? They know that they have built up such a massive user base that, maybe I shouldn't say coasting. I think the way I've articulated it before is, when there is a negative impact on their business, it tends to be dampened by the very large user install base that they have, right? And so they have been able to weather, they've built up some business resilience through this period where some might argue that their production pipeline, right, isn't hitting on the cadence it should, as far as like their big AAA zeitgeist titles. And it like where they've been able to take the business and where they've been able to keep the business moving forward is entirely based on like past goodwill, right? So that, yes, that I definitely agree with. Okay, let's go into let's go into the last segment. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 has been a game that I have come back to. I did some soul searching earlier in the month. I can't remember if I've talked about this here or maybe I talked about it on Brat, but I'll try and get through it really quickly. Like, wanting to double down and hyper focus on my favorite genres, and be less so worried about chasing the zeitgeist of what's on the front page of Metacritic. First person shooters has definitely been like my very limited set of kind of core staple foods that I've decided, I'm going to focus on. And as I was pulling that apart and I was kind of asking these questions, Thrifty and I talked about it. And I said, we should, I've been trying to figure out like who's on my Mount Rushmore first person shooters. I was like, well, Call of Duty's got to be up there, right? But I'm like, first of all, whose face would I put on there? I guess I would put Captain Price. But then I was trying to pull apart, like, but why? Like, and I was thinking about action RPGs too, which is also one of my favorite genres. And one of the things where there's a crossover between Diablo 4 and Call of Duty is in Diablo, well, not so much Diablo 4. I would say more so Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. Diablo 4 is kind of oriented around the paradigm of like always having your most powerful weapons armed. But Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, there was definitely that, like, I'm constantly shuffling and rummaging through my inventory, right, to kind of swap weapons around and change them. And Tao and I have talked on the show. We're like, I prefer playing single player Call of Duty, or when I play with Tao, because Tao is the same way that, like, we literally change our loadouts between every match, right, and often go and rummage through weapons builds and change out attachments. So, and that's one of the things that I love about Call of Duty is that constant, like, nearly unlimited weapons combinations, right, and attachments, and always being able to try out something new and fresh, and like striking on a great combination and going, oh, like this, yeah, this is great, this feels awesome. And that's why I came back. And I also, because I gave myself time to think about it, also realized what was driving me nuts with Call of Duty. And I talk about, like, I enjoy like these games where I'm on the grind. And I finally realized what it was about Call of Duty that was the grind that I didn't like, and that's the battle pass. Like, what I hated about Call of Duty was when I was putting myself under pressure and anxiety about, oh my God, there's like 3 days left in the season. I got to get through like 20 more levels. It's going so slow. Oh, I've run out of like double tokens. What do you mean it's not double XP? Weekend this weekend? What the hell? And I'm like staying up till 2:00 in the morning, right, to get crunch. And I'm like, so the first thing I said was, A, I'm not doing that anymore. But B, I said, even if I do the battle pass, I'm just not putting pressure on myself. Like, if I finish it, great. If I don't finish it, fine, whatever. If something comes up, if another game comes up and I want to spend time on it, like, I'm not going to make myself feel guilty, right, about spending COD points on a battle pass, right? So I've been able to return to the game and have a lot more fun. Probably after going through all that, probably my most significant thing to say tonight is I am at Prestige 9, level 29, and with 2 months to go, I should make Prestige 10 this year. So 2 months to go before Modern Warfare 4 comes out. So yeah, I'm not gonna get to like Prestige 10 level, triple digits or whatever, but it will be significant, and I will be happy to be at Prestige 10. So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun. And as I will continue pounding the table about, I recently went through a conversion of moving several of my monitors over to OLEDs, and I will continue to say playing PC games on an OLED is a transformative life experience. And that is also true while playing Call of Duty. Tao, what's your game?
Yeah, I jumped back into Cyberpunk 2077 this past weekend. Playing that on the Switch too. Just kind of going through the story mode right now. I've been trying to focus on the story mode and not be sidetracked as much as I usually am on these type of games, open world games. So just kind of plugging away at the story. I'm not even sure how like far I'm in the game, but I just unlocked something which I was like, I thought I was like halfway, 3/4 of the way through the game, but I don't know if this was just like a late unlock that you get for your character. It's another progression tree for shoot, I forgot what it was for now I'm thinking about it. There's just like another progression tree that you unlock that you can power up within the game. So I just unlocked it and I was like, oh, okay. Like maybe I like I said, I don't know if I'm not as far as I thought it was, or just like I said, it's just a late thing. So but yeah, I'm just enjoying it. I don't know if it's something just with the Switch itself, but I always find the controls when you're shooting like hypersensitive in this game for some reason, more so than any other like shooting game that I've played on the Switch too. I don't know, I gotta dial it down some more. Like it seems like I have to dial it down every time I play this game on the Switch too, but it's just super weird. Like I'm just like totally out of control, crazy when I'm trying to aim, when I'm doing ADS and trying to aim at enemies and stuff. So, and maybe it's just because I'm used to now because I'm playing on PC now for so long. Maybe it's just because of that, and I just have to get used to a controller again. But it's just kind of weird. That's kind of a weird quirk that I've seen. But yeah, just plugging away at that right now.
Okay, and I think DBQ next game.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say, for the sake of time, I'm just gonna say basically, other than some indie games like Hard Count this week, I have spent nothing but college football. I'm playing a whole lot of college football in year 5 of a dynasty. On my 3rd team now, got hired away from Rutgers to Indiana after winning a national championship, and being at a school that has a whole lot of NIL money to spend makes a big difference, which makes sense within real life. There was a patch 2 weeks ago or so that corrected some of the NIL offers that the PC was doing, or where they weren't doing NIL offers during recruiting. And so it feels, you're not being able to snipe somebody cheap because everybody's getting hunted. And so it has got a little more complicated. But it's thoroughly enjoying the RPG kind of, menu management aspects just as much as the on the field game.
Okay, I'm gonna try and bring this up, and I'll have this have this playing in the back. I'll probably have it playing over your last segment, Tal. But so the other game I've been playing and went back to was digging through the backlog and went back to Overload, which is a PC game made by the former developers of Descent 3. And so this is a 6 Degrees of Freedom.
It totally looks like Descent. When you just did that spin there, I was like, what game is this? Yeah.
So this is I constantly script the date on this. It's 2017 or 2018, I believe. This is actually a VR enabled game, and when I was back into live streaming a lot, I actually used to play a lot of this in VR, which actually makes the game actually easier to play. I'm not frustrated, but I've definitely learned that, oh yeah, this was much easier when I could like slew the ship around and like look to the upper left or upper right and look at enemies, or when somebody's shooting at me out of a corner, I could actually look over at them and see where the heck they were, because so many times here I'm like, where is that coming from? But regardless of having a good time playing this, I am playing it on an ultra widescreen. And also playing it with it's not homogeneous flight control system setup that I have. One of them, which is a Logitech Extreme 3D joystick, along with a CH Products throttle, which CH Products was like one of these like big flight control system vendors like way back in the day, and they were one of the top vendors, and I had wanted like a CH Products setup for so long but couldn't afford it. And then in later years I wound up just getting the throttle because I looked at the flight stick and I'm like, I don't really like the flight stick as much anymore. So but that's what I'm playing with here. So having a good time playing this. Tao, what was your last game?
Yeah, real quick, just Palworld I've been playing on the Steam Deck. Actually, when I was back on vacation a couple weeks ago, I was playing that a lot during the weekend. So just going through the 1.0 since it's been fully released now. Just going through. I'm actually just going through and unlocking the map right now as much as I can. There's different save points, or not save points, fast travel points that you can unlock as you're going around the world. So I'm just trying to do that right now, and then I'll probably go through and beat all the towers. I think I've beaten 2 so far. I think there's 7, maybe 8 or so altogether that kind of tie into the story, the overall story. So that's all I'm doing right now.
Okay, so for For new games coming out this week, Beast of Reincarnation comes out tomorrow for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. Comes out on August 4th. Liza P Complete Edition comes to the Switch 2 on Wednesday. Is that Wednesday? Wednesday, August 6th, which is also the same day that Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls comes to PlayStation 5 and PC.
The 6th is a Thursday.
Is it? Yes, I'm sorry. Today's the 2nd. I keep thinking today's the 3rd. So yes, Beast of Reincarnation out on Tuesday, August 4th, and Liza P Complete Edition and Marvel Tokon out on Thursday, August 6th. So thanks so much for everybody who came through tonight. Impossible for me to remember all the names to rattle down. Thrifty, The Real Innate, Ramon Terrell, Hero Down Under, Borbor Country came through as well. I miss you, Borbor. Wish you were around more. Not just here. I know you don't have to come by the show as much. I know you were a regular over at Brap Show. So love seeing you when you come through. Like I said, Thrifty was here. I mentioned Ramon Terrell. So I saw more numbers of people in the chat. So thanks for anybody who came through and lurked as well for this live show. For anybody who watches the archive version of this live show on the E2KG Network podcast channel on YouTube, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel, so you can just receive a notification whenever we post new content. Whether you come through the live show or watch the archive VOD, we appreciate you either way. Next week, Towmaster99 will be in the pilot seat, and DBQ Hams and I will be co-pilot. So until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, play the games that you like, come here to talk to us about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts here on the Enough to Keep Going weekly video games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.